Yeah, we're going live. Hi, Rupert. Can you hear me?
Hello, Anas. Yes. Hello from Oxford.
Yeah, hi again from Mumbai. The big news in India is we have the Prime Minister has extended the lockdown by another 3 weeks. So I think the lockdown is now going till about 3rd of May. So that's what the big news in India now is.
Well, that's
How is it there?
very similar to what we've had announced yesterday in the UK. They've just announced that they're extending the lockdown back to the 7th of May.
7th of May, okay.
Which is a bit disappointing for me because it's my 50th birthday on the 3rd of May. So that means I won't be able to invite any friends for my birthday. Disappointing.
Yeah. So I think we have to live with it, I guess. So I think today's topic is very relevant from that perspective. Today we're going to discuss real estate, Rupert, and we've been doing a lot of work on the research on wealth creation around real estate for the last 5 to 6 years. Yeah, and globally we've been doing it for the last 20 years, and so we partnered with Groha to come up with something around some of the top performers in terms of real estate industry in India. So in India, generally it's a very early stage from the evolution of real estate perspective. Just to give you some kind of an example, uh, the number of billion-dollar enterprises from the real estate sector in India is about 10 to 12, and I believe in India there's about 100. So that is a huge differential. But they always try to compare China to India, and what I always say is, when China's GDP was comparable to that of India, the number of real estate billionaires were actually zero in China. And now that China has a GDP of about 13 to 14 trillion, you have around 100 billionaires. I mean, China has around 100 billionaires. So I think we were all expecting that the GDP is going to grow, Indian market is going to expand, and which will have a positive impact on the real estate sector, which will create a lot of wealth in the sector and so on. And here comes the coronavirus issue, and Indian economy as such was heading towards a recession, and on top of that, the virus issue came into picture. Because of it, it's completely a lockdown, and the sector is in standstill. So this is definitely going to have a huge negative impact on the real estate sector. Just to give you some kind of number, Indian real estate index in the stock market, it's gone down by around 40%. 40%, the valuation of the index gone by 40%. The whole Sensex is only down by around 17 to 18%. It's a huge value disruption there. So that's a huge thing. And then today, one of the top mortgage lenders, a leader, he came out saying that there could be a price correction of about 20% in the Indian real estate sector. So all that is fine. But then the problem that I inherently see is Indian real estate in generally is about most of the companies are very highly leveraged or levered. So because of which, if there is a pause in the construction, which could possibly lead to delay in sales, and this will further have a dominoes effect in terms of default, and thereby affecting the sector as a whole. So these are some of the observations that I find in India. So unless and until there is a huge stimulus from the government side, or unless and until there is a huge some kind of relaxation for the workers to start actually go ahead with the construction after taking all the precautionary measure, Indian real estate is definitely going to go through some kind of a gloomy scenario. But that's what's happening in India. So just want to know what are your thoughts, what's happening in that side, and what do you see in the rest of the world? And I know we come up with the global property pricing index. What is that? Tell me a bit more about it.
Well, look, thank you very much, Anis, for that. I guess the way I see it today, and what we're trying to discuss, is whether you, as a investor, should be investing into property. And if it's not property, then a house physically, then what about the real estate developers themselves? And I've got some stats, and actually these are stats that you and I did the end of last year. And so they're relevant because I still think they display an idea as to what the Indian high net worth is looking to achieve. So we found that in our survey of about 500 Indian high net worth, sort of Indian dollar millionaires, if you like, and we found that 28% were looking to, if you look at their preferred investments, 28% said it was real estate. So real estate is far and away the biggest recipient of the personal investments of the Indian high net worth, followed by 18% is gold, followed by equity at 17%, and then fixed income and others at 9%. Now, if you then compare it to, we asked another question, which is, over the next 3 years, what investment class are you looking to increase? 31% said real estate, and 26% said stocks and equities, and then you have fixed income, and then crypto, I believe it was about 10% for crypto as well. So I just mentioned that. I like to compare that against what we have in China. And in China, you've got also, number one personal investment class is real estate. But it's real estate and stocks. Actually, gold is a big difference. Gold comes out number 5 or 6, and so it's number 2 for India. But for Chinese, it's a number 5 or 6 or something like that. So in both two of the largest countries in the world, the high net worth individuals are preferred investment class is real estate. And then, I was talking to some people yesterday from China. Some investors, and we were discussing about what's going to happen in the real estate prices on the ground in China, because China's gone through lockdown. It started in mid-January, and we're now we're now mid-April, so 3 months later, China's back to normal-ish. It's pretty much all the shops are opening up, or they're all open. The restaurants are open. The expensive restaurants are still suffering because a lot of people don't have the same appetite, if you like, for going out as they had before. And rental prices just about getting back to normal again. So that's 3 months from the beginning of lockdown. So by that calculation, in the UK, we went into lockdown in beginning of April. So 3 months from that, and to go back to normal world. And I think it's the same with India. We went into lockdown very similar time. So if we base it on that, then we're looking at the 1st of May, June, July. Beginning in early July, we're going to see, I really very much hope, back to work as normal. And of course, the UK and India will have a slightly different trajectory, but it's still something to sort of just bear in mind and as a whole. So that sort of takes me to, so going to China 3 months later after lockdown. And the feeling is that countries are going to be printing a lot of money. So in the UK, in order to be able to get through this coronavirus challenge, the government, I understand, is going to be printing quite a lot of money. And they feel that in China, they're going to be doing something similar as well. So that means that we're going to see inflation coming up. And, sort of if there's going to be a lowering of interest rates as well, certainly in the UK, they lower them even less. The interest rates are almost zero anyway. And we've seen the same in America. So there is an expectation of inflation coming up. And so to own a hard asset like real estate is probably not a bad investment, from that perspective, from a counter to inflation and other. However, of course, if the economy tanks, if the economy suffers really badly, then there's not going to be a lot of buyers out there. And that's going to obviously change things too. And the other final comment I would say in this opening part is, when you look at the culture of a place like China, every young married pretty much has to bring with them a house. So if you're a male and a wannabe husband in China, and or in a big city like Shanghai or Beijing, and you want to get married successfully, ideally you would have a house that would come with it. And so it is very much bred into the culture that, come what may, I want to own my own house. And that's probably one of the reasons that real estate prices are really quite expensive now. Price of a house in Shanghai, in the center of town, probably, do you work by square foot or by
square feet?
And so by square foot, by square meter, you're probably looking at 15,000 US dollars. So in the center of town, this is like a good place, not the best, but like a good center of town in Shanghai or Beijing or Shenzhen or Hangzhou, is pretty much you're looking at 1,500 US dollars per square foot. And just to put that into perspective, and and so we can see that. So I think that's sort of what I see the significance of today's discussion, and hopefully we can expand on it further. But I just sort of throw that out to you. There's lots of we've got lots of data on this. So when we looked at the best of the best, or the consumer survey, the high net worths in India, where they like to travel to, for example. Within India itself, obviously, it's the great tourist destinations of Goa and Kerala and Leh and Manali, Jaipur, Pune, Shillong, Rishikesh. These places, many of them I haven't been to. That's the tourist destinations, of course. But behind a tourist destination, you actually get a lot of, sort of tourism-related property. That's a second home, or that people buy as purely as an investment. And we've seen that in China. In China, the top two destinations are absolutely Sanya, the island of Sanya, or the island of Hainan, right in the southwest of China. And then there's a mountainous region called Yunnan. And the real estate prices for these two destinations have been very significant, because every high net worth wants to own a place in one of these two places, in both, if not in at least one of these two places, because Hainan is very warm when it's in the north, and then Yunnan, which is this other place down the South China, it's got a lot of culture and mountainous, and it's got a lovely climate pretty much throughout the whole year. Anyway, so I thought I'd just kick off with that. We can talk about the global billionaires in a second. But anyway, yeah, back to you, Anas.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I've already started getting questions. And one of the questions that I received was, will gold lead the investment market around the world? Do you see any such kind of trend where, let's say, you would know pretty much about the UK? I've heard that UK, the real estate market has absolutely come to a standstill, but there are new solutions through which customers can actually visit the property through virtual reality and buy properties online. So there is some kind of ecosystem being developed around that area as well. So what have you been seeing? Are there investments going to any particular asset classes at this point in time? Are they moving out from real estate, looking at gold? I mean, equity definitely not a bad time, I guess, but not a good time, I guess. So did you see any such trends happening in the places where you are, UK or China, wherever?
I mean, first of all, gold as an investment class, I think, is very heavily, concentrated for India. So the Chinese high net worth, gold will be on that top 10 list, but it will be right down the middle or bottom. And so it's not a primary investment. Primary investment is absolutely, it is real estate, and it is stocks and shares. And sort of for the UK as well, people talk about gold as a reserve investment, personal investment, but I don't know many of my friends who invest in any gold at all. It would always be stocks and shares and real estate. They're the two main drivers. So the fact that gold for high net worth Indians is above stocks and shares in our survey at the end of last year, this is obviously pre-coronavirus, and says an enormous amount about this sort of about the Indian high net worth investment strategy, personal high net investment strategies. And the reason we should be very interested in what these high net worths are doing is because, at least in terms of wealth creation and wealth preservation, they are the ones who are leading. The fact that they've been most successful in, sort of generating and then looking after their wealth means that we should be paying a lot of attention to how they invest their assets. And probably, Anis, after this, we should put a link to the consumer report so that people can see a bit more about it.
Yeah.
Just before, and just to put India a little bit into the context of the world, now I will try and answer your question at the end, is we looked at real estate development around the world, and we put out a global real estate rich list, actually just before coronavirus in for the beginning of, well, it was in February or March that we put this list out this year. So it's very fresh. And in the world, we managed to find 256 dollar billionaires who made their money primarily in real estate. And if you then look to those countries, where were they? In the most successful real estate developers, number one by a long shot was China, at over half. So you're looking at 54% of those 256, 130 plus individuals are Chinese billionaires, centered around Hong Kong and South China. We call it the Greater Bay Area. It's this new sort of area around Hong Kong, Canton, Shenzhen, that sort of area. That's the sort of the main bulk of where it all comes from. Number two, but a small number two. So if number one had 54%, number two was the US with 13%, and it was driven by New York. So of the 17 or 18 billionaires, about 20 odd billionaires that we found in the US, the vast majority of them were in New York, and led by a company called Irving Company, a guy called Donald Bren, who was worth about 17 billion. Actually, sorry, he's not. He's the richest American real estate developer, but actually he's in California. But the main bulk of the most successful real estate developers come out of New York, and Trump is one of them. And most of his real estate assets that are worth a lot are in New York. Now, coronavirus has actually probably dropped property prices by about 20-30%. I've been reading in New York. That's just based on the listed company equivalent. So, so Donald Trump's wealth, I think when we estimated it, was about $3 billion US. It's probably dropped by about a third in the last month, mainly because New York right now is the epicenter of the coronavirus in the world, and their property prices has been sort of very significantly hit as we are speaking right now. And so the third one is the UK, and we have the most or the richest UK real estate developer. Funny enough, is it somebody inherited, because almost 80% of this global developers, 80% are self-made and only 20% are inherited. But the richest guy is actually very young. He's only 29 years old. He's the 10th generation. And his ancestor, he's a guy called Hugh Grosvenor of Grosvenor Estates. And they basically, their family pretty much owns Mayfair and a lot of Knightsbridge, which are sort of the most expensive areas in London. For those of you who know London, it's the ones with the highest property price in the UK. And their ancestor, it's a good story actually. Their ancestor, about 400 years ago, did something nice for the king. And the king at the time said, okay, here's a plot of land for you, which was in the back and beyond. Nobody really wanted it. It was like really boggy and marshy and lots of disease around there. But anyway, today it happens to be Mayfair and Knightsbridge. So they've obviously managed it terribly well over the generations. And he's the number one in the UK. And we looked up India, and India had 9 dollar billionaires, and it was fifth. And then the vast majority of these dollar billionaires lived in Mumbai, obviously where you are, Anas. Maybe you have great opportunity here as well. And that's sort of just how we did some analysis. And I guess what that's telling us is that what's driving this? How come that China's got 130, 140? The richest in the world is a guy called Xu Chang from Evergrande, and he basically does residential real estate. His wealth has come down by 20% probably in the last 2 years, and he's got $33 billion still, despite having come down 20%. And the reason he's come down so much is because he's got a lot of leverage. So he's got a lot of debt out there. But the biggest issue that he's got, well, no, not the issue, just to put it into context for India, and I'd be interested to see what you hear. He sold last year $86 billion US worth of residential real estate. $86 billion US for one company. The number two guy is also from China. They sold also the best part of, let's call it the best part of $100 billion US. What's the top real estate developer in India selling by comparison?
I don't know, about 7 billion.
7 billion. It's obviously a huge number, but China's gone through a very strong urbanization over the last, say, 20, 30 years. And I think that's been the main source of wealth creation in China, literally over the last 20 years. And I would expect something similar to happen in India. But one of the things that, the way China has dealt with it, and the biggest difference between the Chinese real estate market, if you like, and the India real estate market, in my opinion, and India and the UK are similar in this case, is in China, all the real estate is fundamentally owned by the government. Now, in India or in the UK, it's privately held. So if you want to build a railway line from city A to city B, you have to go through, like 100 different or 1,000 different owners of real estate along the way, and it makes it very, very difficult to build a railway line. Or if you want to build a new complex, a new real estate development, you to get all the plots of land together, and in a country where you've got private property ownership, is extremely difficult. In China, what they've done, and the way they've driven this this new real estate or urbanization, is rather than change the old city, they just made a new city next door to it. So to update the old city, like if you're taking a city like Mumbai or Delhi, it's got all that history in it. It's incredibly difficult to update it because people got their daily lives to go by. But if you just build a new city and then you right next door to it, which is what China's been doing all the time, then you just move people gradually into this new city, and that's sort of one of the reasons that China's been successful with their urbanization programs. So anyway, that's just sort of putting it into the context. So if you look at the world's most successful real estate developers, 80% of them are self-made, which is a higher percentage than I expected. Over half are from China. India has got 9 of the $256 billionaires, and so, in my opinion, that should show that India's got a huge amount of potential, and this is something I can never quite understand. When I go to visit you in Mumbai or Delhi or in other places, or Bangalore, is I can't understand why why these property prices are not growing faster. The price increase last year, and we did a global property price change or an index, and the only Indian city to make it was Hyderabad. And Hyderabad last year had gone up by 9%, was the fastest growing big city in India, if you like, in terms of property price. Obviously, since coronavirus has come, I'm sure there's been a significant impact as well. Anyway, so I just sort of put that out. This is data that we've researched, and possibly it might help our viewers to get a better idea as to the context of the Indian real estate investment opportunity. And so, yeah, I'm personally a big fan. In the UK, and a lot of when I started out, a lot of my friends, we left university, we worked for 4 years, and then we somehow came up with a deposit. In my case, I managed to borrow £5,000 from my grandmother, because it was almost impossible to pull together that much money. And then I managed to put down a 1%. That was a, trying to think. It was like it was. Anyway, I managed to put down my deposit. That was that was my deposit, and then I managed to borrow 90% on top of that. But for a lot of people, that's how it started out. And then we were lucky because property prices went up. And then 4 years later, when I sold that small flat, which is about 30 square meters, I was then able to pay back my grandmother for the loan, and then buy a slightly larger place, which had about 80 square meters. But most of my friends would have been doing something similar in the UK. And what about amongst your friends?
I think it's very interesting to hear your story. And currently, you bought the house that you live in Oxford, that you bought it from Rowan Atkinson, who starred in Mr. Bean.
Yeah, that's another story.
Yeah. So I have a question from someone called Narandal. His question, I put that on the screen, is the rupee depreciation, COVID-19, job loss, and all that stuff. Will that are this all the right indicators for NRIs to invest in India? So this is a very interesting question, and I would probably give you my perspective on this. But from your
Yeah.
perspective, you could probably answer it from a Brexit standpoint. So when Brexit happened, it was more or less like a black swan moment in the UK, wherein the pound depreciated, and there was some economic uh, downturn and headwind and all that stuff. So you could possibly give some insights on how what the trend was towards investing in real estate. I know for a fact that a lot of Indian entrepreneurs or billionaires in India, restless, were very keen on buying properties in London at that point in time, including the Grosvenor House, and they were bidding and everything. And I personally know that from the stories, but because the pound depreciated by 20%, that was a price arbitrage. Uh, from an Indian context, look, I've been meeting a lot of quite a few entrepreneurs from the India Rich List. So we do this real estate event in Mumbai every year, and through which we have met almost about 70 to 80 of the top 100 in the real estate Rich List in India, the top 100 list. My observation is some of the entrepreneurs in the real estate list are really solid. I mean, they're very sound. I can definitely know pick easily from the top 10 itself. You can check the list out. They're really solid, and some of them are very low on debt. One interesting entrepreneur is, if you look at Oberoi Realty, for instance, right, and it's a great company, very low on debt, amazing entrepreneur. So there are individuals and companies like that which are run on sound principle, which could be a good set of companies to look at investing into. And there is never an Indian, like Rupert said, if India has to hit a GDP of, I don't know, 8 to 10 trillion, the real estate sector has to significantly grow. The houses and residences have to come out. There is no going away from it. So we have to identify who are those companies who will probably build these houses, these residences and apartments. Who are those guys? They could be the companies with sound principle, possibly zero debt, because you're going to see a next 5 6 months of absolutely lean period in terms of sales. So what are those kind of companies who can outstand or come up with these crises stronger? Look at those kind of companies, find out, possibly buy an apartment, owning there, or take as investment. It may not be a bad idea at all. No, I would definitely recommend looking at solid companies if you have cash on your side. And Bobby, you can give some insights from the Brexit and what happened at that point in time. Was that an attractive? We could possibly relate very much into a COVID black swan.
Well, I think there's a few ways of sort of looking at this. And the first is that I'll tell you a story from China. And there are three different ways of investing into real estate. And the first, obviously, is you buy a house. The second is that you buy shares in a real estate company that gives you exposure to real estate. And a Chinese friend of mine was telling me just before coronavirus, but very recently, say about 4 months ago. And he was saying what you should do in China today is you should sell your house and use the money and the proceeds from that to invest into the coupon. Because a lot of these real estate developers are growing so fast and they have quite a high coupon rate. So if you buy their debt, then you can actually get like a sort of somewhere between 7 to 12% in some cases return on investment just by buying their debt. So, and I just put that out there just as a way. So the recommendation of my friends in China is that over the next few years, this is before coronavirus, but they didn't expect real estate prices over the next 3 to 5 years to grow at more than a very small percent. And this is in the local currency. And so they were saying, sell your houses and put the money into a coupon for real estate owners if you're willing to take that risk. Regarding to your question about Brexit and the impact on real estate prices in the UK, basically what happened is that 3 years ago, in June 2016, 3.5 years ago, and the UK voted to go Brexit. The pound devalued by 15% almost overnight. And property prices in the UK have pretty much stagnated ever since. So we've had inflation, we've had the economy not growing particularly, but property prices, rather the government, in my opinion, it's just my personal opinion, decided not to let property prices fall too much, because that would have a big, have an impact on the whole banking system and the whole financial sector. So better to keep the property prices flat, but for 3 years, no change at all. So that would, in theory, have meant, that it was quite a good time if you come to buy property in the UK, in the last, well, I would say in the last 6 months, was actually probably quite a good time to buy. Since then, of course, we've had coronavirus, and again, we've devalued the pound again by another 5% against the dollar. So we're 20% down on where we were about 3 years ago. And obviously, there's a bit more of a question mark as to whether you should be buying in the UK. But just to talk about the UK here, I've got 2 stats here for you. We asked in our annual survey of Chinese high net worths. So these are people whose opinions you should value if you're looking at personal investments. What is your preferred destination overseas to buy property in? And the answer is London. And we asked this same question to the Indian high net worths. There's, again, before coronavirus, at the end of last year. Number 1 destination to buy property in overseas, number 1 was UK, London, followed by Singapore, Canada, US, UAE, Saudi, Sri Lanka, and South Africa. These are destinations for investments for Indian high net worths. So taking both those factors into account, the UK, I think, is pretty good destination, because you've got the big countries of India and China. Their high net worth individuals both want to have access to it. So I would have thought, if you're looking for an overseas investment, that would be as good a place. That would be a strong opportunity. And anyway, so I just sort of make that comment. But the question was actually talking about NRIs moving their investments into India today. Well, I mean, the key things you're looking for is, one is, are you going to get rental paid? And secondly, you're going to get rental yield. Are you going to get property price increase? And if you're going to invest into the country, well, I would have thought rental yield at the moment is, at least for the next 3 months, would be very tough. We're hearing a lot of stories about offices, people vacating their offices just to keep their costs under control, at least for the next 3 months, or getting a rent holiday. And we saw that a lot in the UK as well. In China, the government gave a lot of rental holidays for 2-3 months, and to try and support some SME companies, small and medium-sized enterprises. So, I don't see rental yields being a strong one at the moment. And in places like Liverpool and Birmingham and cities like that, which has got university cities in the UK, again, you're not going to get great student rental yield now, because there are no students being allowed to study there at the moment. They're all at home. So if I was an NRI looking at real estate, buying property in India, I would certainly be watching it, because I'm sure there's some bargains to be had. And fundamentally, I think that has to be one of the most solid investment classes. But the timing of coming in, I think you need to factor in quite a lot. Also, I'm not familiar specifically to India about the sort of where interest rates are going at the moment. But we've seen the rupee being devalued by 6% in the last 2 months against the US dollar, and obviously the stock markets have come down by 25-26% in India. So that will clearly mean that it's quite an attractive proposition, because for an NRI using FX or foreign exchange to buy in India today, I mean, you're looking at something like 1/3 cheaper, and there must be some great bargains to be had, because everybody knows that India's on the roll, and then it's got a sort of, in the next 20-30 years, India's going to be the second, if not the third, if not the second largest economy in the world. If you can get in at 1/3 cheaper than 2 months ago. Wow.
Yeah, I think I would just add one more statistics to it. Basically, in the only big economy that is supposed to grow other than China and the world this year is going to be India, right? The rental yields in India is pretty poor as of now. So there could be a price correction which would possibly justify future rental yields. So I think it would be a interesting time to look at good companies and enter into Indian real estate. So I've got a couple of people who've said hello. Nikhil Kamath, hi, hello. Who said hi? I don't know if he's still around. And I've got Rafad who's attended our events before. And yeah, of course, we'll let you know when our next event comes in. So go to our the next point really. So next point really is you personally, right, Rupert? What are your investment priority for the next 3 months? Would you invest anywhere? Would you look at real estate as a sector? You have so many connections. Have you received requests from your entrepreneur peers in terms of wanting to invest into real estate? Helping them identify good. I, for instance, have received requests from some of the traditional entrepreneurs coming and saying, "Look, where should I invest money into?" I'm like, "I'm not an investment advisor, but they want to get into online gaming and all that stuff." So, do you see any trends coming from your network in terms of investing into any particular geography? Any such requests come by your way?
Well, I mean, again, just to split it between pre-coronavirus and post-coronavirus, because I think where we are today, there's a lot of unknowns and we don't really have a lot of data. But pre-coronavirus, and I listed out some cities here that their property price in the last 3 years has grown by 50%. And these are cities that you'd be quite surprised at. I mean, we're looking at Bangkok in Thailand, Berlin in Germany, Seattle, Las Vegas in America. These property prices, their average property price in the last three and a half years has gone up by 50%. That's massive. And I would expect to see, if you could go into the property market today in the big cities like Bangalore or Hyderabad or wherever, the other big cities in India today, and you could buy some prime real estate. At the end of the day, I'm sure that has to be a good investment. And I just use the 50% because a lot of people think, well, we're an emerging economy here in India or here in China. And to see fast price increases is something that we would expect to see in a place like us. However, there's a lot of international cities which you wouldn't expect Thailand, Bangkok, or Seattle, or Berlin, to actually have such high, or Vancouver. Another one is Vancouver in Canada. And I know Canada is a very popular destination for a lot of Indian high net worth as well. But their property price has gone up by 50% in the last 3 years. It's pretty interesting as well. From me personally, so I've always, and I've not been very good at stocks and shares. And the reason I haven't been very good at stocks and shares is because I don't like watching them day by day. And I prefer to have an investment that's slightly longer term. And so my very first investment was a small flat I mentioned earlier on in London. And that was it was just under 40 square meters, small flat. And then I sold that and I bought a slightly larger flat, which is about 80 square meters, and I still hold that. And then my thought after that was then to try and have real estate in different currencies. So I bought a small flat in Shanghai, and then I bought one in Europe as well. Outside the when Britain was looking like it's going to go Brexit, I bought one in Luxembourg, which is actually where I come from. So that was my sort of idea, and then you just leave them for sort of 10 years, and you don't need to think about it too much. You're protected against inflation. You're protected against currency fluctuations. So if a currency goes up in one country, and you can have exposure to another country, and that's probably not a bad thing. I've never done the US myself, partly because I've not understood enough about it. But if I had more money, I absolutely would invest into property in New York, or in San Francisco or in LA, one of those big cities, I would certainly have bought something there for rental yields. And in terms of stocks and shares, well, my big thing at the moment is cryptocurrency. And I'm a big fan of the gold of crypto, which is Bitcoin. So and so I haven't been, I only bought one or two just as a way of understanding it. But certainly it's something that I think we should all be looking at. And interesting enough, when we asked the Indian high net worth, what are you planning to invest into in the next 3 years? Crypto was there for 10% of them. So 10% were thinking of crypto. 10% of Indians, of Indian high net worth, let's say, are looking to buy into crypto. Well, that's going to have a significant price impact on Bitcoin and these other cryptocurrencies out there. So I would certainly be looking at that, but I wouldn't, if it was, I'm not a professional investor, I wouldn't put anything more than you can afford to lose. So everybody said put less than, sort of 5% of the money that you have spare into crypto. I wouldn't put anything more than that, but that's what I've done, and I put sort of a very small amount into crypto, just to have an idea as to what's going on. I think it's got a lot of potential. The price at the moment it's still around just under $10,000 for a Bitcoin, but I'd certainly be looking at those sort of potentially they will go up by 20 times or 10 times over the next 5 to 10 years. That's my personal opinion. But we have issues obviously in India, as we have in China, about getting foreign currency or getting you have currency restrictions, so it's quite difficult to buy. You can only buy, I think, with non-rupees or non-Chinese yuan to buy cryptos.
Okay. Yeah. So that pretty much concludes our session today. And what we intend to do over the next rest of the week is possibly get an entrepreneur from the real estate sector to speak about some of the trends in the market and how do they see the whole situation, and possibly even get somebody from the supply side, like material supplier or someone like Grover to come and speak about how they see the demands fluctuating. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, Rupert, from my side, and I hope this was a good session. You liked it. We would try to, any feedback that you have, you should come and let us know. We really are trying out all these digital market avenues, and we'd love to improve on it. So let us know when. We'd love to take your feedback and further improvise whatever we're doing. Any last words, Rupert?
Yeah, well, no, I think the purpose of a broadcast like today, or a short session like today, is to try and stimulate some new in investing into a particular sector. And today we talked about real estate, try to put the Indian real estate into the context of the world, of the global real estate, and make some comparisons, obviously, between the two largest countries in the world, India and China, because I think there are some valid comparatives there. However, for most people, it's difficult to really think of doing something globally. I know there are a lot of NRIs out there, but most people have not got foreign currency. So where would you go? Well, in my opinion, I would look at the tourist destinations. And I'm going to go back as my summary is, if you're looking to buy an investment home, I would be looking at which are the tourist destinations that the Indian high net worth prefer. 22% in our research said that Goa was number one, Kerala was number two, 16%, and I would go for that. I would literally Leh, Manali, Jaipur, Pune, Shillong, and Rishikesh, and I would be thinking of doing that, because at least you're going to get rental yield. However, obviously today you're not going to get any rental yield because you're in lockdown. You're not allowed to go out. Like in England, I'm in lockdown in my home. I can't go out of my home. I've been out from my home for the last 3 weeks, and I've just been extended for 3 weeks as well, probably like everybody else in India as well. That might just be the moment that you should be looking when these prices are clearly going to be low. You buy something in Goa today or in Kerala today, the prices are going to be very good value. And we know that the Indian high net worth likes these places. So if you can afford it as a second destination, as a second home, and to deliver strong and rental yield. And I personally would think about that. And then the other one is obviously if is close to your home today, because you've got to be able to manage it as well. That's something that's very important. Anyway, thank you, Anna. You've enjoyed today, and thank you very much, Anna, as always. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.